And we are recording. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conservatish, episode 188. My name is Peter Feliciano. I am your host of Conservatish. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. Make sure you like, share, leave a review, rate it. Make sure you find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano, or you can find me at Conservatish at my backup account, because white liberals are going to destroy my first one. So make sure you follow my backup. And you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/conservatish. Ladies and gentlemen and Zers, we have the wonderful Rhonda Mary on the show today. Yay!
Thank you. Hey, y'all. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really happy that we got to work this out. So first things first, where can people find you?
So I'm Rhonda Mary. If you put in Rhonda Mary, some of my pages have been banned and stuff like that. But Rhonda Mary on YouTube, on Instagram, and then on Twitter, I am Rhonda Mary.
Okay, great. I really wanted to have you on the show to get into the meat of the cultural topics. You know what I mean? Because I don't think there's anything that scares white liberals more than a black woman who thinks for herself, and especially a black woman who thinks for herself who loves guns. You love guns. And so I wanted to kind of get into the meat of that stuff. For the last year or so, my show's been specifically almost on a crusade every other episode. Sometimes I still have my regular stuff, but almost on a crusade to murder identity politics. I hate identity politics. Anybody who has darker skin or is Asian or is trans or whatever, anybody who is a certain identity has to have a certain politics. And I really dislike that, especially last year when after George Floyd was killed, everybody was like, white people don't get to have a say, and it's time to just listen to black people. And so I put up all these black conservatives, like, what about them? Are you going to listen to them? I think, as I thought about earlier today, white liberals don't really care about elevating black voices. They care about elevating approved black voices. And you have a black voice that is not approved. And so I wanted to talk to you about it. So.
I think I'm approved. I approve myself, my own Rhonda Mary stamp of approval. That's good enough for me.
Right. When did you first start getting into guns?
So just a couple of years ago. I'm pretty new to it. I'm very honest and forthcoming about that. Not long after I started my YouTube channel, I was already kind of learning more about the Constitution, about American history, Black history, the Bill of Rights, and things like this. So I was kind of, interested in learning a little bit more about it, but never really considered, being a gun owner. Simultaneously, as I was learning all of these things, I ended up being in a hit and run / road rage incident, which, at the time I was.
I hate to pause you. Your mic is clicking a little bit.
Okay. Let's do that.
Continue. So at that same time, you got in a hit and run road rage.
Yes, I was in a hit and run / road rage incident where a driver, apparently I wasn't going fast enough for him, even though I was going about 75 in a 70 mile per hour lane on the highway, where when he attempted to push my car off the road with his car. At some point in this incident, I was thinking he was gonna stop, and we were on the side of the road, and he walked up to my car. He was cursing and berating me. It was a Sunday morning, and I was headed to meet my friends for brunch. And, as this was happening, my parents were at church, and I kept thinking, like, if something happens to me on the side of this road, like, who's going to tell my parents, what happens? And the reporting officer just happened to be a young Black woman. And as I was telling her about the incident, making a police report, she was like, "You didn't have a gun?" I was like, "No." She was like, "You could have said you feared for your life." Now, looking back during that time, I don't think that would have been the right time to use a firearm. specifically because of everything that I've learned since then. However, I would never, ever, ever want to feel that vulnerable again. That allowed me to see that, you know, I really am my own first responder. Like, I was there. It happened to me. The police officer couldn't do anything but show up after the fact, you know, to make the report. And then even having somebody that kind of looked like me be the first person to ever plant that idea in my head that you have autonomy here. You are free to protect yourself. You know, firearms aren't just for old white men or school shooters or gangsters. You have the ability to protect yourself. You know what I mean? And then I grew up in Mississippi, so you know, it would just seem like it would make sense. But the neighborhood and the area that I grew up in, it just wasn't, you know, we just weren't big on it. Not especially not for like women.
Hmm. Okay. So it wasn't necessarily the type of community that you grew up in where you would go to the firing range or hunt or any of that stuff?
I mean, we have access to those things, but just culturally, you know, I grew up in a very Christian home. You know, I grew up mostly Black community, you know, so it just was like guns just wasn't the culture where I was from, you know, even whether it was like the media or the way people would talk, it's almost as if they would present it like, you know, guns are for hunters and guns are for gangsters.
Right. So it happened a few years ago. What was your first time at the gun range like?
So I had a friend that took me my first time, and we shot, I think, maybe like 4 or 5 different firearms, and I was nervous. You know, I was super nervous, but I was excited. And you know, it was a good time. And after that experience, you know, I'm like, I have to tell other people about this. Like, I have to tell other women, you know, that this is also available to us. And then, you know, with the whole looking at like where we are socially, culturally, you know, people are trying to make me feel like I'm not American, even though I was born on this soil and everything that, you know, predated with my ancestors and things like this. I deserve, and even knowing what I've known now and what I've learned, I've had ancestors who died for that right, for me to have that right. So in some regards, it's almost like a FU to the system. It's a FU to the media. It's like, y'all can't tell me what to do type energy, you know? So honestly, I kind of fell in love with that aspect of it because it's it's the taboo that's there, but I know that the taboo is only there because of lack of knowledge, right? And so now, in some ways, I'm helping educate people about this tool, because, you know, just off first glance, you know, people may think, oh, like they think gun, they may think dangerous or some of those other things I mentioned. But then when you see me and I'm smiling, or I have on my pink or purple tee, I have my little colorful nails, and you know, I'm doing these little happy, funny reels and videos, and it's kind of taking away and removing some of that stigma.
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I remember the first time I shot a gun, and the only time I've shot a gun was a big rifle. I think it was 30-06. So maybe some professional gun people are like, that ain't shit, you know. But for me, it was like, you know, it felt very powerful. It felt good. And it also did take away the idea. Number one, you hold it and you're like, okay, this isn't like the movies. This isn't like, you know, break yourself. This is more like, this could actually kill someone or me, or like this could do some damage. And so it's a feeling of responsibility. And
Right.
maybe that's kind of subconsciously or consciously, maybe that's part of the reason that the media and the government in general doesn't really like us having that responsibility. You know,
Right.
they like them having the responsibility. I agree. It does seem like I don't if somebody doesn't know about it, that's when they're much more. It seems like a bigger monster in the.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I try to encourage people, like, if I can just get you to the gun range that first time and to just learn basic safety, I just think about how many minds could be changed with just learning basic safety. So many lives could be saved learning basic safety and making that available to our communities.
Hmm. Who are some of the people who helped you to that decision? You said you had a friend who brought you to the gun range first. Was it also maybe Colin Noir or any other second?
No, no, that's the crazy part about it. I so basically what happened is I had a friend that I was really close with, and he was kind of, I would bounce ideas off of him with like my YouTube and stuff like that. When I first started, and I was actually on the phone with him when that experience happened with the road rage incident. We were like really close friends, and it's crazy because I was so frantic. I had him on my car phone, and I kept saying, call 911 for me, call 911 for me. And he was in Memphis at the time, and he's like, I can't call the 911 for you. But I was so scared. I didn't want to not somebody to not witness or kind of like almost like be with me, right, as this was happening. So I was just almost scared to even let him go from the phone. But anyway, so he kind of saw that transition of me going to purchase my first firearm, me going to shoot with with the guy that took me my first time shooting. My brother-in-law was kind of, into guns and stuff like this. And this was around a time that he and my sister were kind of like newly married and things like that. So I was learning from him. And then I told him, I was like, I have an idea. And he was like, what is it? And I was like, I really want to start something where I'm trying to inspire more Black women to become gun owners. And he was like, oh my God, that's such a good idea. I think you should look more into it, see who else is doing it. And so around that time, that's kind of like when I started finding these other groups online and like through social media and stuff like that. I started learning more. I ended up finding organizations like NAGA and Black Guns Matter. And, I started finding a lot of the uh, trainers and just people doing so much. And I started networking and making connections with people, and people have really just embraced me with open arms, honestly. And the crazy part about it is what I've been able to do in such a short time. I believe it just shows that, like, this was needed. There was an opportunity, there was a door there for this type of interest, this type of education, this type of, inspiration, whatever you want to call it. Because like I said, I call myself new. I don't think a actual like brand new person would go to the gun range with me and be like, oh, she's new too. However, I consider myself, because of just the people that I'm in. You have some people that have been prior military. You have some people that have trained for years. You have some people that have learned, around their families or just grew up around guns. None of that was my experience.
Right. So one of the ideas that I had about this thing, and I'm incredibly smart and and prolific when it comes to my ideas. But one of the ideas that I've felt recently is that I almost feel like the main goal of my show and a lot of the people and the people that I follow and that follow me, etc., is and maybe the human experience in general is connection. Connection is the main thing that I think that why we're here, whether it be connection to a higher power, connection to each other, that we're not alone, we're okay. And I feel like almost that's why the current day liberals, sorry y'all, but is almost against that connection. One of the ideas, one of the examples is the gun thing. One of the examples, you were afraid this was a strange thing, you didn't know about it, it seems more scary when you don't have connection to it. Same thing with cops. People who don't know any cops, people who haven't spent time with cops, they think they have that same experience that you had about like, keep your friend on the phone because I want somebody to witness, blah, blah, blah. They have that because they've been told that about the police. The police are after me. The police are going to kill me, even though I've done nothing wrong. It's like, the message. So, and also along with that, I think a lot of white liberals don't know enough Black people to understand how complicated, how nuanced, how human, how sometimes wonderful and sometimes horrific you are, just like all humans, just like all humans. And so, as far as the connection to cop thing in the Christian, you were talking about, you grew up in Mississippi. Did you have experience knowing police officers, or did you have any bad experiences growing up with them, or any good ones?
I had this one experience where I felt like the police officer was trying to bully me a little bit. I was leaving my boyfriend's house one night. This was like years ago. Um, and he pulled me over. I didn't do anything wrong. I can't even remember why he pulled me over. I don't even think he had a reason for pulling me over. And he was asking me, where was I going? Was I under the influence? And he just kept asking me. And I'm like, no, and I'm like, if I haven't done anything, can I go? And I've also known other instances where it's this one guy who he used to work at the mall when I used to work at the mall like years ago. And he just kind of always had a snug like attitude. It was just really weird, kind of just always walking around with his chest pumped up. And he ended up becoming, I think he did security at that time, if I remember correctly. And then a few years later, it came out that he like beat up on some young kid as he was working as an officer. And when the story came out, because of his attitude and kind of witnessing him dealing with people, I wasn't taken aback by that story. I found it very believable, that he would do something like that. So yes, I have been in situations where I directly know or have known of officers who allowed their egos and their badge to get in the way of their position. I'm a kind of like I want to do what I want, leave me alone as long as I'm not bothering anybody type person. And that's the position that I think I would like to see a lot of our officers take. um I do, we obviously have a media that exacerbates and lies, right, to the public. And you do have a lot of people that are, walking around fearful of officers that may not necessarily have to be. But I do think that, it really just depends. It really just depends. And that's a part of human nature, very similar to teachers, very similar to doctors. You have people in these professions that allow the professions or their ego to get the best of them, and they are not, and politicians, please don't let me leave them out. And you have people that are working in these positions, and these are more service positions, working with people, working directly with the human population, supposed to be doing what's better for the people. And sometimes in these areas you have people that have failed, and it leaves a bad stain, unfortunately, on those positions. Police officers having the highest responsibility when you're walking around with a gun on your hip, And, I walk around with mine on my hip too, but not as many confrontations as your officer, your typical
Yeah.
officer
I'm in,
may
I'm
run
in
into.
Manhattan. We're not allowed to. I looked up the laws a little bit ago, and I can have it unloaded in my house. And if I want to go to the gun range, I can do that. I don't think there are any in Manhattan. I have to keep it in separate locked boxes in my car to go to the gun range. The bullets and the gun have to be in separate lock containers to and from the gun range.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I hate it for you. But yeah, officers have a big responsibility, and when you're working directly with, and over in some ways, right? When we talk about, levels of position, um, you know, working over and inside these communities, that's a big role. That's a huge role to fill. And though, like I said, in some regards, yes, the media uh lies and that exacerbates things. However, there has been a theme. Malcolm X, one of my heroes, would even talk about this back in like the 60s, just you just have like in these inner cities, sometimes just not good relationships between the community and officers. Um, some communities that are oftentimes better off is when you're able to have liaisons that can work hand in hand, with the officers, making sure they're more familiar with the community, allowing people to see them regularly, get to know them, right? Have them patrolling in a very a way that's just a level of care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when the cops are actually from that neighborhood or know that
Right.
neighborhood, when they have the money to not be on shift and go to read to the little kids or go to a pool party and go to a barbecue, like when they play basketball, like when your fucking community, there's a lot more investment both ways, both to the
Right.
community, to them, and them to the community. There's knowledge, you see their face, just like you're saying.
And then also, it's a relatability
Mhm.
thing too. Sometimes, whether people want to admit it or not, you do have people that relate based on culture. Sometimes people are easier to understand if you can relate to that culture. And sometimes, when those things are missing, you may read somebody's body language wrong. You may read their, I've been I'm from the South, okay? I have traveled in places in the North where I think people are getting ready to fight. I think it's a fight about to break out, and somebody's like, oh no, they good. They just talking about the game or the barbecue from this weekend. And I'm like, huh? You
That's
know?
right. That's why I think, again, with the connection thing, I think white liberal women, especially, if you don't know enough Black people, you don't understand that, and this is not always correct, but the stereotype is sometimes correct, where especially Black women, you wear your heart on your sleeve. You know what I mean? Like and that's important and it's valuable spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever. But if you're not used to the emotion that's displayed by certain Black women, you think, oh my God, they must be correct. You know what I mean? They equate the feeling that you have towards the injustice that some guy, at the 7-Eleven is not giving you a discount, type of shit. They equate the feeling that you have with it being correct. And a lot of white liberals, especially, I think they don't know enough Black people. And so they're intimidated by that emotion. They're intimidated by that display. They come up from, WASP, white Anglo-Saxon, whatever it is. They come up from a culture that's very, we keep our shame, we keep stuff hidden. We don't have emotion in the streets. We don't have fun unless we're drunk. Like we cover up, it's very like, the English people, you know what I mean? Like very like demure and very like, oh, and certain other cultures don't do that. And so when you
Right.
get around cultures that don't do that, you think, oh my gosh, this person, not only can I not control this person, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, you can read. You can read their body language wrong. You can read their personality wrong just by kind of not knowing or relating to the culture. So I definitely get it. And it's not always, it's not even always just a black thing. Like I've said, my experiences with, I've had experiences like traveling, and I'll think somebody is getting an attitude with me because of the way they're talking, right? It's like it just comes off abrasive, and it's like, oh no, that's how they talk.
Right.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go back down to the south now.
I was driving from California to Oklahoma City, and I got stopped at the border of one of the borders or whatever of Texas and Oklahoma. And I'm half Puerto Rican, but people don't know what I am. They're like, is he
Mhm.
Chinese? Is he Mexican? We don't know what he is. And so I got stopped, and I was speeding. But I was on my way to a conference. I'm sober 19 years, and so I don't drink or use drugs or any of that stuff anymore. But I was stopped by the cops and told them what I was on my way. And yes, I was speeding. Yes, I deserved a ticket, blah, blah, blah. But they had me get out. They brought, the dog in to sniff that. And I'm like, all right, come on, man. Come on. Why
It's
would
a
I,
little too much.
right? Do I look high? Does the car smell like it? No, it's a little too much. And I think on that same vein, the little too much happens to everybody in different ways. As an example, FBI statistics show that 85% of DUI arrests are white people, right? So are they unfairly arresting white people in DUIs? Probably not. I think the weirdness, the bad experiences come from different things. It's not just bad thing happens to black person, it must be race. Good thing happens to white person, it must be race. You know what I'm saying? These are
Mhm.
complicated issues, and the more we talk about it and connect with each other about it, the better. And that's why I really appreciate your work on that. I really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, what has been obviously? Let's transition into a new topic. We'll go maybe like 15, 20 more minutes. Okay with you?
Mhm.
Okay. Because you have it's not a topic I've talked a lot about because I have different type of guests on my show. I try to have every once in a while I'll have somebody who's liberal or whatever. But not a lot of people get into the Fauci stuff, and I think you have a lot of opinions on the Fauci stuff, and so I'd love for us to talk about how soon into the COVID stuff did you start smelling something was fishy?
2 weeks.
Okay. What was the first thing that tipped you off?
2 weeks. So I was at home like the first 2 weeks, chilling, didn't really know what to expect. But I remembered when those videos were first coming out of China and people were uh falling out, passing out in the middle of the street, falling down on concrete, being locked up in their homes, you know. And then when I started seeing that, I haven't seen that happen. I'm like, that's hint number one. And so by the end of May, I think I probably know maybe one person, known of, I should say. I did not know this person directly. By the end of May, I known of one person that was allegedly in the hospital on the
Ventilator.
ventilators due to COVID. And I think that person ended up living. It was a friend of the lady that I was working for at the time. But as time went on, and I knew people that were getting COVID, and they would, you know, be okay in a couple of days. I'm like, this can't be why they're shutting the whole country down. It just made no sense. And everybody that I knew that was like, fit, young, practically healthy were fine in just like 3, 4 days, maybe a week at the worst. And that was kind of like the worst case scenarios, but very just light symptoms, headache, loss of taste, loss of smell. And that was it. And then what really solidified it for me is that when my aunt and uncle, who are both overweight, ended up getting it, right? They, my aunt was fine, or she just had some kind of mild symptoms, but my uncle ended up going into the hospital. And I remember texting my aunt, I was like, whatever you do, do not let them put him on a ventilator. And this was before the American, like, mainstream media was even moving past the ventilators, right? And so I remember texting her that, and when he ended up, he was in the hospital for like maybe like 2 or 3 days, and I think he did like some breathing treatments. And when he ended up leaving the hospital, I called my aunt and I was just asking, how he do, and what they had to do to him in the hospital and all this. And she was like, "Oh, he took hydroxychloroquine." I was like, skirt, like record scratch. He did what? Yeah, he took hydroxychloroquine. I was like, when did he take it? And then when did he recover after taking it? Oh, he felt better in like 24, 48 hours after taking it. I'm like, hold the phone. Are you kidding me? So at the same time, simultaneously, while they were, crucifying Trump in the media about hydroxychloroquine, it saved my uncle's life. I was so thankful. I was so freaking thankful that my uncle's doctor was not a freaking activist. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Seriously. And so I think like a month or two later, another one of my uncles ended up getting it. Same thing, took hydroxychloroquine. Like, everybody's moved on with their life. And Mississippi was way more lenient than some of these other states. So we never even felt really the brunt of it. And the lady that I was working for at the time when it first happened, I think she gave us maybe a month or two, and she was like, "Oh, y'all got to get back to work, because come on in with your little mask, whatever you got to do."
Right.
But the money don't stop. Jeff Bezos ain't stopped working.
Yeah.
The Walton family ain't stopped working. And the crazy part about it is, I was working at an eye doctor's office. Our sales went through the roof. I don't know if you had more people just looking for something to do, looking for money to spend. Oh, this would be a great time to go get my eyes checked. And then you had other doctors' offices that were like closed, or maybe they were closed or kind of reducing capacity. And we was like, all right, we'll take y'all money. I'm talking about, I don't I don't think she'd ever seen that kind of money coming in.
Right.
So,
I completely forgot. That's a beautiful point. I completely forgot that at the beginning we would see all those videos of Chinese people dressed up in the hazmat suits, almost hosing other Chinese people down, like, get back indoors, quarantine, Like, we never did that over here. You know what I mean?
most people forgot. The programming was done. The programming was solidified. It was the fear that they were trying to sell you, right? You see that, you scrolling on Instagram, you see somebody passing out, getting boarded in their house. You're like, oh, I'm inside.
Right. And it's been brought up pretty smartly that it's very possible that the Chinese government started or allowed, or at the very least used, coronavirus to get Hong Kong protesters off the streets, to stop the Hong Kong protest. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, and I know I talk about this a lot, but I've actually been to China, and I know and I know Chinese people in China. Do not put anything above the Chinese government or ours. Hello, get a gun. But don't put anything above the Chinese government. They are ruthless. Okay, they like the idea that harvesting body parts is so silly. They would never. Now it's coming more into mainstream. You know what I mean? People in Chinatown in San Francisco were yelling about the Chinese government harvesting body parts for years, 10 years ago. And those are those crazy protesters in Chinatown. And now it's becoming more and more mainstream. don't put anything past the Chinese government. And so the idea that they wanted to get a hold of Hong Kong and threaten and beat them and do whatever they needed to do to get those people back into communism, I don't put that above. I think the Chinese government was absolutely capable of doing that.
That is absolutely crazy. And to think at the beginning of this, you had so many people taking up for China. Like even when, even when Trump was calling it like the China virus and all of this. And I'm like, you had people mad at him, but I'm like, the world needs to know. First of all, second of all, do you know what those people are over there doing to black people in China? Like, make it make sense. Like, y'all taking up for them, and only a dummy would take it personally against a random Chinese person. But that is different from holding the Chinese government responsible and saying, hey, what the heck happened here? And we think you guys are responsible for this.
Right. And there is a difference, and things are complicated. Along with that, there's been a big old push for and stop Asian hate, blah, blah, blah. Now, let's diagnose it correctly. There are abundant videos from your cell phone or from security cam footage of black men, usually between 19, maybe 17 and late 20s, accosting older Chinese people in Chinatown in Oakland. Okay. I don't think they're doing it because of racism. It's been brought up very smartly that they're going to rob from somebody anyway because they're robbers. And so older Chinese people who don't have any guns, especially in Oakland, nobody has a gun in California unless you're away from the cities, especially in Oakland, and they're older and they're getting money out of an ATM. Of course, they're going to go for somebody more vulnerable. They don't want to go after Rhonda Mary, who's got a fucking piece. You know what I mean? They want to go for somebody who's more vulnerable. So I don't even think it's Asian hate. But thank God, though, I think the white liberals were like, woohoo, somebody white shot a couple of Asian people. Woohoo! Now we can say stop Asian hate, even though it's been fucking selfish black robbers, crime people doing that shit. Now we can say, oh, I stand with Asians. Shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like that's, at least diagnose it the right way. But even then, I personally don't believe that it was because of racism that the Asians have been, that there's been a rise against attack them.
Well, it's actually very clever. So even beyond like the markets that you were talking about, right? Let's say if I went in to get a service. So where I'm from, you would typically have an Asian person working, let's say doing nails. If I go into that shop and this shop is in my community and this person is servicing me, if we're to get into an argument about, let's say, my payment, they didn't give me my change, they lied to me about the pricing and then upped it, anything, right? If we get into it, people typically, if you are in an argument, if you are in a fight, you are going to downgrade to your lowest self. You are going to try to say the ugliest, most hurtful, meanest thing that is coming to your mind. So even though I've done business with this person for years, right? This first scuffle, if I say anything as related to this person's appearance, it is automatically going to be an alleged hate crime now. And even if I don't say anything as it relates to their appearance, just because of the way the media is pushing it now, it could possibly be an alleged hate crime. Yeah. So, something that I've been trying to tell people for a long time, including specifically Black people, is to stop allowing ourselves to be used for incorrect narratives. What that will do is, first, they always put a black face on it when they want to kind of push something and just make it like a cause and make it well, I can't even think of the word I'm looking for. But so first, hate crimes, right? They'll say, oh, hate crimes are happening to Black people. Hate speech is happening to Black people. And then they will use us to end up protecting other groups, which actually hurts us, right? And then when you're not thinking about who's going to enforce that law, right? From the police officer to the judge, and like I said earlier, cultural differences. If I say something and that judge says, well, that word sounds offensive, or these white people on the jury think that that word is offensive, now you're up the creek. Right. On something that they initially was telling you, oh, this is going to protect you. And the whole time, I from my opinions, like my political beliefs to the things that I've seen, it's no way in good faith that I can promote or support more and more laws and then turn around and complain about the police officer interactions, about being over policed, about being, judged and sentenced more harshly. This is why we have to be very cognizant of what we are supporting and get behind, because a lot of times those laws don't tend to favor us the way we're being told in the media that they will.
Right. Especially in that same, I always say, like, in that same interaction you were talking about, if she called you the N-word and you called her the G-word, you're still, like, that's not a hate crime. You're trying to hurt each other's feelings. Okay. You feel slighted in some way. You both are trying to, even though one of you probably is not in the most spiritual mindset, like, is it the most mature thing to do? No. But if me and a dude are at a bar and they do this and I do this, and one of them calls it the F word for gay people, is it because we hate gays? No, it's because we're trying to hurt that person's feelings. But now, rather than just an emotional argument, now I could go to jail. Now I could pay a fine. Where's that fine money go to, by the way? That fine money goes into the government, thank you very much. And the government gets to do whatever the government wants to do with it. They're not funneling that $300 for me saying the F word that means gays back into the gay community. They're pocketing that. They're using that to enforce more of the laws. It's exactly like what you're saying. Not being cognizant of that is very dangerous. Lastly, you have a great shirt. Entertainers are not leaders. I love that shirt. What does that mean to you?
So it was actually inspired by the late Malcolm X. He talked about how a lot of times you would have politicians inviting these entertainers to the White House, and they're not leaders, they're puppets. Puppets was a word that he used. And even if you look at studies suggest, and even here recently with the COVID lockdowns and things like that, they've done studies that suggest that Black people, more than any other demographic, are more likely to listen to celebrities, to listen to entertainers, to take on their opinions. And I've just seen how hurtful that has been to our culture, to our society, to the Black community, to American culture. We've created a system where we put these celebrities, which are just humans, on these pedestals. Now, obviously, the shirt is polarizing. It's to get a reaction. It's to make people think. It's not an absolute. You do have entertainers that I absolutely do believe care about their neighborhoods, care about their communities, care about giving back and things like this. However, when an entertainer or a celebrity has a sponsor, more likely than not, they are speaking on the behalf, or at the very least, uh, um, going in line with what's contractually allowed. And so, is that always at the best benefit of the population? I would probably say no. It's more likely to the benefit of the corporation or whoever their sponsor may be, you know?
Almost
So,
like Patrice O'Neill used to call it golden handcuffs. If I tell to somebody who really wants to be famous, fine, I'll give you money, power, fame, all that stuff. And it's golden and it's beautiful. But you do have to say and tweet exactly what we want at exactly the right time. It must all be in line. You cannot even take any umbrage with any violence somebody from Black Lives Matter does. You cannot disagree a little bit. You have to fall in line. Click. You know what I mean?
absolutely, absolutely. And so, I've really been trying to shatter this belief that just because somebody is on TV that automatically makes them a leader by proxy. What if they just want to do their music? What if they just want to play their sport? I don't even think it's right to hold people up to that type of standard. I don't think it's right. And the fact that I've had a chance to meet several celebrities, and just knowing that they're regular people, knowing for a fact that some of them, knowing for a fact, this is not something I believe, knowing there's people that I could name that, of course, I won't, but I know for a fact are intentionally being misleading or grifting. And it's not my place to say, but I know that there are people out here that will mislead their fans to get the dollar.
Mhm.
Or you have some people that's just, they may be good at their craft, but they may not be hip enough to know that this corporation is using them for their agenda.
Right. I have a friend, and I won't name his business either or his, but he's got a nice following and he's whatever. But I have a friend who doesn't really care about politics, and he's also a Latin guy. And in order to be on this show that they got him in, which tours around the world, and in order to be a part of this show that they're dangling in front of him, go to LA, be famous, blah, 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 he needs to look more Latin. The PR people were like, yeah, you're Latin, but you don't look Latin enough. And so they literally spray tanned him, okay, and put him in a shirt, okay. They literally, anything he wants to tweet or put on Instagram, he has to send it to them. They approve it, and then he can post it. And when the Black Lives Matter stuff was happening last year, they wrote something for everybody on the show that this is exactly what you're going to put up on Instagram. You can add a few things, but whatever you add, you send it back to us. We'll approve or we don't approve. And then you can, because again, it's all PR people, it's all lawyers, it's all golden handcuffs.
And it's all contracts.
Yes. Yeah. Slimy, creepy stuff. Almost like, gee golly, Joe Biden in China. Whoever has the money now is dictating everything. Anyway, thank you so much, Rhonda Mary. I'll let you go back to your wonderful life down in the South, where you can hang on to guns as long as you want. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time. Where can people find you?
I am on YouTube and Instagram at Rhonda Mary. Twitter, I am Rhonda Mary.
Awesome. And they can go to Patreon as well and support your whole.
Yes, absolutely. My Patreon, I think / Rhonda Mary as well.
Okay, awesome. Wherever you're listening, everybody, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share this, make sure you leave a review. Go get her Entertainers Are Not Leaders shirt. Go get my It's Okay If We Disagree on Politics shirt at peterfeliciano.com, and subscribe wherever you're listening. Thank you so much, Rhonda Mary. I'll go ahead and
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.